Jason, if you had a time machine, what time would you go back to?
I would definitely want to go back to the shootout at the OK Corral because there were bullets going in both directions, and who wouldn't want to catch a souvenir right in the delicate neck meat?
Hat on for this or off?
Hat on, please.
Are we done?
Welcome back to Film Hooligans bonus feature review. I'm your host, Jon Dunning, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Jason Alt.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming back.
That is right. Thank you for coming back. We are doing another, talking about another bonus feature, and helping me with that is an Elysian Dragon's Tooth. I think this looks a little bit old-timey, the label, so I'm going to say, yeah, maybe we could find that in Tombstone, Arizona in the 1800s. 1900s? I don't know my
1900s.
1900s. Jason?
I'm drinking a very, very special release. This is from Dark Horse in Marshall, Michigan. It's called Quantum Leap. It's a collaboration with Revelry Brewing from Charleston, South Carolina. It is a quadruple session IPA. It is potent, and it is getting me through this review.
Yeah, it must be special because you are not an IPA guy. That much I know about you. Quantum Leap, a good beer and a good show. So, L'chaim.
Prost.
We do like to talk about filmmakers on the main show, as you all know. So this actually had, for being a crowd-funded film, this had actually a pretty legit director attached to this, and Alex Cox, director of, I guess, pseudo-classics, we'll say, Sid and Nancy and Repo Man.
Yeah, two very impactful films, and he describes it as he's, like, blacklisted, but it just... I don't know. He made a couple real bad movies right after Sid and Nancy, and then just sort of disappeared. He's always been more of a cult film guy, so maybe he wasn't ready for the success.
Sure.
That Repo Man and Sid and Nancy were going to bring him, but like this film, Tombstone Roshomon, doesn't really feel like it's in that oeuvre per se. But I feel like maybe he's moved on a little bit, and matured as a filmmaker over the course of his career, making movies that you have not heard of.
Sure. Let's kind of scale it back real quick, because this was a mashup, kind of a amalgamation. This is a Western kind of sci-fi. But first let's it says it in the title that this is modeled after a very specific film in the absolute classic Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon.
Tombstone, yep.
Yeah.
Akira Kurosawa's Western classic starring director Kurt Russell.
That's right. For anyone that doesn't know, what is like Rashomon about, and what is the Rashomon effect?
So Rashomon was a movie that was based on one of the parts of a larger book. The story of Rashomon tells the story of an encounter from like different points of view. I don't want to give too much away. If you haven't seen Kurosawa's Rashomon, go do that for sure. But that's sort of the unreliable narrator effect is really explored in that, where everybody has a slightly different take on what happened. And so when they show everything from people's point of view, the story is very, very different. And it shows that like our perspectives, shape our reality essentially. So the fact that like everyone's POV isn't like completely objective, and it just doesn't show what happened from a different angle, but shows from a completely different perspective, I think is very interesting. And Kurosawa is no stranger to being mashed up with Westerns. Like Kurosawa's films are basically Eastern Westerns, and you can take a Kurosawa film like Seven Samurai and just straight make a cowboy movie out of it, and it's a damn good movie. So I don't think that these two types of films being mashed up necessarily was that out of line, right? Like why not make a Kurosawa movie set in Tombstone type of a deal? So this tells the story of the shootout at the OK Corral from different perspectives of people who were there, directly involved, indirectly involved, and I think that's a fantastic premise.
Well, and here's the thing. I think that historically, there was many other like battles and gunfights and shootouts that were probably more, impactful or climactic. But this one, the actual gunfight at the OK Corral, the history of it in Tombstone, Arizona, had so much mystique about it because it was very Rashomon-esque in real life. It was told by so many different unreliable narrators because everyone kind of had a stake in it to hide something about it, and that's why I think it lend perfectly to this material. So I absolutely, if this was peanut butter and jelly mashing together as far as these two worlds colliding, I think that was great. Now the vehicle to which they used, that's a little bit more strange. And even director Alex Cox, he had a writing buddy in the beginning of the writing process to this film, who like wound up leaving later, and he really, it was Rudy Wurlitzer. He wanted to kind of introduce why we're doing this, and so he introduced this sci-fi element to where we're treated to kind of a throwaway tagline of these reporters or historians have found a way to travel back in time to get the real accounts of this event, but they do it one day late. So they're still there. They figure out time travel and all that, but they get there the day after. So, but at least they get to kind of take account to what happened the day after.
I almost quit watching the movie. And you know what? I will say I'm glad I stuck with it. So if you're hearing this premise and you're like,
right. You're not alone.
You're not alone, but I will say I am glad I stuck with it.
Sure.
Because the longer the movie goes on, the less they're like, oh, by the way, we're from the future. It's just these characters being interviewed, and they are just showing what happened, and it's shot well. It's, acted pretty well. For the budget of this movie, it was done really well. So I found myself thinking, instead of like, I hate this, I started to think they did a really good job for such a dumb premise that they botched. And then the longer it goes on, you forget about that whole thing, and you're just like, oh, this is cool. It's Tombstone. Yeah. So if you watch this for about 20 minutes, it's Tombstone.
Sure.
And seeing the other characters' perspectives, it was really neat. 'Cause, like, the McClorys are like, yeah, we all had rifles on us. We would have just murdered them coming down the street if we wanted a gunfight. And that's something I had never considered before. So they actually did a really good job of actually finding these historical accounts from people involved and reading, what they actually said about it, and actually presenting what happened from completely novel points of view. And I think that was done incredibly effectively. And I might have really, really liked the entire movie if that's all it had been. If it had just been, oh, we're talking to newspaper reporters the next day, whatever,
Because written and like the dialogue in this, the acting in this, the shooting, like it all looks fantastic. You definitely can tell that this was made by a director with chops, and the film is probably, ironically, Alex Cox's like cleanest looking film, although it's supposed to be dusty and in the Old West. Like, you put this up next to like the griminess of Repo Man, or just like you feel like you're gonna get hepatitis watching Sid and Nancy. Like, this is like super like cleaned up and stuff, like everything's real shiny, which is almost like a negative, but you could kind of see past that. It's super glossy, but the dialogue's great, and you could tell, like, it's a crowdfunded film, so none of these actors have like credits to anything else. However, it seemed like, I acted I was a theater actor up all the way through high school and all that, and you could see like he probably went to like the local, whatever in Arizona, like the local community acting association, and just kind of pulled these theater actors. Everyone feels like they're talking to the back of the room. They're giving these like kind of like extravagant performances, but it's great. The thing is just like, I don't know if this movie needed to be a movie. This is something that I think would have been, that could have been sold to like Discovery Channel, and I think it would have killed. Like, because it just felt like I was watching like a real good, like period piece doc that was like super well made.
Sure.
And you could have cut out all the weird like sci-fi stuff, and that would have worked for me like so much better.
I feel like if Alex Cox did a director's cut of this and just like, that's Tombstone Rashomon. And then you're like, well, I know what both of those things are. Is it what I think it is? Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
No surprises. You could cut 90 seconds of footage out of this and make it 100% better movie and give him some money to do that. I don't know. Tombstone Rashomon ended up being very enjoyable.
Sure.
So if you notice, like, I just got to get through how stupid it is that these guys are driving in a Ford Explorer right now.
God.
It's like, well, there was a Ford Explorer in Lord of the Rings too, so like no movie's perfect. So
Sure.
all you need to do is cut a little bit out, and then it's just Tombstone Rashomon. That's it, and that would have been fine. By the end, I found myself really enjoying it.
The characters are they're played so straight and so grandiose. You got the authenticness of Doc Holliday's tuberculosis and all that. Like, they did such a good job, and then they just some scenes just threw in such weird stuff that derailed it for me. I mean, I still think, like, this thing's on Prime. It's you could stream it everywhere. It's still, I think, worth a look for a very focused people, like people that are interested in the whole Rashomon effect, or like a fan of Tombstone, or just this like historical thing. Like,
this almost works as like bonus like footage from the movie Tombstone. It's like, well, we shot some stuff from these other characters' perspectives, and when you like if this had been an episode of like Tombstone Rashomon, the episode about the other points of view on Discovery Channel, like you said, it would have been so good. So if you are interested in Tombstone, it's not as good. It's not as good as Wyatt Earp, but the production value on this was better than you would see on like the History Channel or something like that. So if you go in from that perspective and you just like ignore the facts, like, we're from the future, if you ignore that junk, I think you'll really enjoy this, because there's some stuff in here that I didn't know, and it raises some questions about that whole thing. And everyone loves Tombstone. Everyone loves quoting that movie. Yeah. Let this be your Huckleberry.
You know what I wanted to see after this is another historic event done this way. I think that this would be a perfect 10 episode
JFK
series.
Rashomon.
Yeah, like on Netflix, right? How could we not see that? And I think this would be like a perfect, rollout to that. So like, and it feels
you could do anything there were different sides, like Miracle on Ice Rashomon.
Sure.
2016
cool. Election Rashomon.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that there is definitely some good bones to this. Like I said, production value, acting, all that great. Just some boneheaded decisions. But if you could, and you could really see past that, and if you're in after
the longer the movie goes on, the more it forgets about that too.
Yes. Yeah. It was almost embarrassed of its own thing.
The movie needed a few minutes to get out of its own way, and once it did, I thought it was pretty enjoyable. So that's all we need to say about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you to Tri-Coast International for allowing us to review this film. It's great. Go check it out on VOD everywhere, probably mostly on Prime. That is our review of Tombstone Rashomon. Now we're going to do the review again 5 different times with 5 different takes, just to keep with the actual theme. But until then, you could find me right here on this very channel. You could listen to this in podcast form on all your favorite platforms. You could also talk to me about movies on Twitter at OrzovDunn. Jason, where can everyone find you?
I'm not Jason. I'm actually a documentarian from the future. I came back to just document, because this episode is the one that puts our film podcast on the map.
That's true.
And I wanted to come back and see, like, what were they like before they got mega famous? And I missed the review by a day, so I'm just sitting in for this. You can find me at Jason Ealt on Twitter. I have a pin post at the top of my profile that says all the other projects I work on if you're interested in that kind of stuff. And I'm going to go watch Tombstone now.